Okay. Okay, so welcome to the Rocstedi Podcast, Ep.26, with Raymond Palmer, a scientist in life longevity and biohacking, really, isn't it, Ray?
Well, you could call it biohacking. So the human body is written by code. We're talking genetic code, exactly the same way computer code's written, but we use amino acids instead of ones and zeros. So when you change the genetic code or you hack it, you can make the human body do different things. There's a whole range of approaches to slowing down the aging process. Hacking the genetic code is just one of them, but also you could say we hack the biochemical code as well. There's a lot of biochemical reactions taking place inside your body for me and you to sit here. In fact, there's so many. I don't think there's no calculator actually big enough to program them, because you have about 37 trillion cells in your body, and each one of those cells performs millions of chemical reactions every second. So the amount of chemical reactions that have to happen for you to sit there and talk to me is quite bewildering. So we're pretty complex, and it's no easy feat to slow it down. But yeah, absolutely, I'm a biohacker, and biohacker is a good way to explain it.
Okay, so why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about your past on how you sort of got into this, and I know you did some studies at Harvard University, and it's fascinating for me to speak to a scientist as such. It's always been one of my favorite subjects at school. I never pursued it. I was a little bit sidetracked and naughty at the time, but you've definitely followed through on this, man. And we've been connected by a mutual friend, Troy Coward, who we did a podcast with
Hey, Troy.
a little while back. So I'm really grateful. Shout out to Troy. Hopefully he gets to watch this later. But yeah, man, why don't you tell us a little bit how you sort of got into it and the track that you've taken to sort of get to where we are today, and then we can really go into a bit more about the body and longevity.
Yeah, sure. So my journey into biotech started out by doing electronic engineering, and from there I was able to design biomedical devices. Then I had a natural predisposition to aging and anti-aging. I've just always been fascinated with it, so I started studying. There is no university that you can currently walk into and say, hey, I want to do a degree in anti-aging. There's no such degree, unfortunately. And the reason there's no such degree is because a lot of universities think it's a silly pursuit. A lot of government departments think that aging is natural, shouldn't be messed with. But I would argue that cancer is natural, and people are not going to sit back and let that take them without a fight. So the WHO, the World Health Organization, they've now classified aging as a treatable disease or a treatable condition that should be treated, because the number one cause of disease and death is aging. So when we look at it like that, we go, wow, all right, so we're trying to reverse engineer people at the moment when they get sick. We wait for them to get sick. We wait for them to get arthritis or something. And then after that, we try and give them all these medications, where if you can keep them young and vibrant, they're not going to get sick. So this is what we're doing. And when I first started thinking in those terms, I thought, wow, this is a fascinating field to be in, because yes, it's I wouldn't call it a long shot. It's going to happen, but it's certainly it's no easy prize. It's certainly a lot to learn, and there's a lot of research that's going to be done. Everybody listening right now, we're closer than you think. We use a term called biological escape velocity, and we feel, scientists in this field feel, that biological escape velocity is going to be here before 2030. That means staying ahead of biological decay. So whatever biological decay comes your way from the aging process, we feel technologies are going to be here to keep you in front of it. So you're not going to waste away and become frail in the future. In fact, you don't now. If you use things like testosterone or steroids under a doctor's guidance, and you use it properly for the proper reasons, not to look like the Hulk, chances are you're not going to become frail. If you're doing resistance exercise, things like this. So when I started looking at this, I found this fascinating. And really, to be honest with you, there's a lot of things that are already here, and we're going to chat about some of these things later in the podcast, I'm sure. But there's a lot of things that are already here, and no one knows about them. And personally, I'm on about 15 pills a day. Some of those are over-the-counter pills. Some of them are pharmaceutical. And so I'm a biohacker. And I use some pharmaceutical grade medications, not for the purpose they were designed for, but for the side effects they offer. And So when I go into a pharmacy, the pharmacist must think that I'm riddled with disease because I'm getting diabetic drugs, I'm getting drugs for depression, I'm getting all sorts of things. And but I'm none of those things. I'm actually for a 48-year-old, I'm extremely healthy. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, he says 48. He's actually 87. He looks fantastic for his age, by the way.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. But so that's how, I guess that's how I got into it. I just started looking at it and I thought this is a fascinating field. No one really is doing it in Australia. I have hit a lot of brick walls in Australia because people down here regard it as, well, they're quite cynical about it. They think it's silly. And I will give you a quick analogy, Joe. The biggest thing I noticed between America and Australia is a beautiful place to live. There's no doubt about it. But when I get into a taxi in America and a taxi driver asks me what I do and I tell them I research human aging and how to slow it down, the first word out of their mouth is, hey, man, that's cool. But when I say that to a taxi driver in Perth, they look at me like I'm a crackpot. And I'm highly qualified, and this is what I do. I'm paid to do this. But yeah, and they will argue with me till they're blue in the face, to tell me it's impossible. And it's almost like you're in the matrix, or they're in the matrix. I'm trying to show them that the reality they were born into is about to change. People are going to be able to adjust the speed at which they age. That's coming very soon. But some people don't like the reality to be changed, and they will lock on to what they believe is true. So I see a lot of that more here, and that's because we don't have a Silicon Valley here in Perth. We just don't have one. So people aren't used to hearing these kinds of conversations. So I get it. But yeah, I do see a big difference between where I'm based and other countries around the world.
Yeah, so literally, I just sent this show link out to a few people. There's a friend of mine, Lee News Debates, who gets on. He's a very like a black and white sort of guy. There's no grey area for him, and he's like, haha, like I don't think so. He's palming off this one as though it doesn't happen. But again, you're a qualified scientist actually in this field. So no, Lee, that is not your opinion this time. It is actual fact from a scientist, because he likes to throw things under the bus all the time.
Yeah.
So what sort of proof has come out over time? So this has been quite experimental for a while. How many years has this been in the process, first of all? And did this originate here in Australia or over in America initially? This study.
Well, when you say this study, I read an insane amount of studies every day. And that's to keep up with all the work that's coming out. Something that we looked at maybe 12 months ago that we've thought was fantastic. 12 months later, we now see has a side effect you don't want. So something that maybe have been promoted 12 months ago, we now say, no, don't touch that. So it's evolving all the time, and it's not going to be perfect. But most of the findings that are coming out, and there's a lot of them, and we'll get into some of those, I say most of them come out from America's Silicon Valley, and also around Boston and Harvard. There's a lot of other institutions there as well doing work in this field. There are other scientists in Australia. I think there's probably only 2 other scientists on the east coast of Australia that specialise in aging, and that's at the university level, where they're kind of doing, I guess, research under a university. Because I do research with universities, but I also work in the private biotech sector. So, but I'll give you some quick proof of what's going on out there. About 150 years ago, I know your listeners probably want to know the big question: is aging reversible? Can it be reversed? Has it ever been reversed? And the answer is, it appears so. It appears so. And the reason I say that is because about 150 years ago, and this is how old the science is. I can't remember the scientist's name now, but he did a Frankenstein experiment, and he got 2 rats, and one of the rats was really, really old, and one of the rats was really, really young, and he got them, and he sewed their circulatory systems together so that the 2 rats could share blood. So the old rat would get young blood, the young rat would get old blood. This is 150 years ago as well. So keep in mind, we've known about these technologies for a long time. The old rat, guess what? Became young. It grew new fur. It had increased muscle mass. Its bones became thicker. Everything you would want to see in an old organism rejuvenating to a more youthful state happened. The younger rat, interestingly, started to get old. And so we know from that experiment that it's likely there is something in old blood that makes organisms old, and there's something in young blood which makes organisms young. Now, as you listen to this, you're probably thinking, wow, okay, what are those compounds? Well, we're on the trail, and we've narrowed it down. In human blood, I think there's over 100,000 compounds. So there's a lot to sift through. But when you look at the biochemical science of blood, you can really disregard a lot of these things straight away and hone in on a few different things. So there's another study that came out in the last couple of years, and it's by a husband and wife couple at the University of Berkeley in California. She and him, their names will pop into my head in a minute, but so the technology we're talking about, where you share young blood with older organisms, that technology is called parabiosis. So these two scientists at the University of Berkeley, they did something different. They thought, well, maybe it's not the young blood having something magical in it that rejuvenated the old mouse, or the old rat. Maybe it's something, maybe just diluting old blood could have a rejuvenation effect. So they got a saline solution with a compound called albumin. Now, albumin is it's ubiquitous inside the human body. It's everywhere, and it is a carrier enzyme that transports nutrients and other things through the blood to where it needs to be. That's all albumin does. So these two scientists at the University of California, Berkeley, they injected old mice and old rats with a saline solution, which was also 5% albumin. And I'd say they did use the albumin because they wanted to make sure that these organisms could still transport nutrients around their body like they should. So they replaced the albumin that they had taken out, and they replaced the blood just with saline solution, which is salt water. It's not overly salty, but it's not going to cause them any harm. And what they saw was fascinating. The rats became young again. So that narrowed it down. You don't even need young blood to stay young. You just need to dilute older blood. Now, this is even more interesting, right? Because everyone's probably asking, well, when is this going to happen to humans? When can we do this? Well, if you're a biohacker, there's probably people trying it right now, but don't do it unless you're in your 70s or 80s. It's not going to have any effect if you're 40 or 50 because you're not old enough to see an effect yet. And by the time anybody in their 40 and 50s reaches their 80s, there's going to be technology that blows this out of the water. So just sit tight. But what's interesting about that is that we know now that it's something in old blood which is making organisms get old. And there is a company in Silicon Valley, I think it's called Ambrosia. Ambrosia. Now they're charging what they were doing based on the back of the parabiosis study, where they were using young blood and putting it into older organisms. What Ambrosia is doing is they're taking young blood plasma. So plasma is some of the stuff you find in young blood, and they centrifuge the young blood and they take out the plasma portion and they inject it. They're injecting it into people that have the money. Now it's $8,000 US to have this done in Silicon Valley. So kids or children's hospitals where they're taking blood from kids for some reason, Ambrosia is buying that blood and then centrifuging it, getting the plasma out of it, and then injecting it into people that have a spare $8,000 US lying around to make them young again. And it's interesting because most of the people that are going for this are CEOs and people with the money. I don't know how good the plasma is going to be because when you just use the plasma, you're actually separating a lot of the other good particles out of the young blood. There is stuff inside young blood that I think would also help, and these things are called exosomes. If you can imagine, you've got two cells, one here and one here. They need to communicate. They need to talk. And the way they do that is by releasing these little tiny vesicles or these little tiny sacs called exosomes. And each exosome contains a strip of DNA or RNA, and the different types of RNA or DNA that's in those exosomes communicates the message to the other cells. So if you've got a wound that needs repairing, this is how cells get organized. This is how they talk. Now in young blood, exosomes are everywhere. The cells are talking all the time. They're doing all these fantastic things. In older blood, not so much. There's hardly any exosomes. Exosomes are also used to build proteins, muscles, and things like this. So I think what we're going to see in the next few years is I think people are going to start using the salt water with albumin, and I think they're also going to use synthetically made exosomes, which is really easy to make. I think they're going to be using those in conjunction with the salt water, or the saline solution, I should say, to rejuvenate older organisms. And I can guarantee you, there's people like me out there already looking. We want to commercialize things. We don't want to talk about stuff that's coming out in 20 years. That's not interesting for you listeners. And I certainly want to use stuff now. So when I'm doing research, when I'm looking at big ticket items, when we're devising what products to bring to market, we never have a long-term view, 10 or 20 years. If it can't really be done in the next 18 months, the company I work for, we're not really going to spend much time looking at it. So because we know for years now, you've probably heard people talk about longevity and anti-aging, other scientists. But then they always say you should be ready in 20 years. And it's like, well, that's
so the internet's just slowing down. I'm not sure if it's your side or mine.
Sure, okay. No worries.
Just give it a sec. You just caught up. You're good again.
Okay, fantastic. So the industry I find myself in quite fascinating, and there's a lot of fantastic things coming out. One of the most proven ways to extend life, and this doesn't reverse aging, but it certainly slows down the aging effect. And I'm going to go into some of the science of it. One of the most proven ways, and it happens across all organisms. So it happens to worms, to fruit flies, to mice, to humans, is fasting. Fasting will extend life by up to 28%. Now, that doesn't mean to say you can fast once a year at a religious festival. It doesn't mean to say you can fast once a week. Prolonged fasting slows down the aging process, and I'll explain why. I don't eat food after 6 p.m. and I don't eat again until lunchtime the next day. And that's 18 hours when my body does not consume any food. Now, when I first started doing that, it was hard because I like to sit and watch TV at night. I don't really.
You mean not even wake up and have a coffee in the morning or anything? Zero?
No, I do. So you caught me out, Joe. I do have something.
Well, this is a question I had for myself because I want to do the fasting thing, but every day I've got to have my morning coffee, right?
Yep.
And I know that I've potentially destroyed this, but I think there's a specific coffee you can have. It's just black with no sugar, right? You can't have milk in it. You can't have sugar, or
absolutely, yep. So you can have green tea, you can have water, you can have black coffee with no sugar. You can use. Look, if I tell you, you can get away with it. Science does show that if you're willing to do some exercise in the morning, as soon as you get up, and I'm not talking about 20 minutes or 45 minutes, I'm talking about literally 3 minutes of high intensity exercise. I'm not sure if you know what mountain climbers are, but you kind of get on the ground with your hands, and then you lift your knees up to your chest, like you're running on the ground as quickly as you can. You do that for 60 seconds, break for 30 seconds, do another 60, break for 30, do another 60. You'll be puffed out by the third minute. And so it's only 3 minutes of exercise. If you do that every morning, that is going to purge whatever glucose is floating around in your blood. And I'm going to get into the energy sources that your body uses in a minute, but the energy source that your body will be using first thing in the morning is not your fat reserves. It's not going to be what you've eaten if you've been fasting. The only place you can get energy from is what we call your carbohydrate battery, and that is the glucose that's swimming around in your blood. Now, if you deplete that by doing some mountain climbers for 3 minutes, you push your body deeper into fasting mode. So
you're saying, sorry, Ray, you're saying you get up in the morning, have a coffee or don't have a coffee, it doesn't matter which one, but do that in the morning when you wake up. And that'll burn the rest of the glucose that's in your system, Absolutely. Put you more into a fasting mode.
And that means if you were to have a coffee and you wanted to put a tiny bit of milk in, which I don't advise you do, but if you did need that milk in there, because I know a lot of people can't drink black coffee, it means that the minute amount, and don't use full cream, you want to use high-low, the minute amount of glucose that may be inside that milk is not going to be enough to take you out of fasting mode because you've just purged any glucose that's remaining in your blood. So fasting mode, how does it work? Why is it so beneficial, and how does it extend life? Well, when you're not eating, and there's no glucose in your blood, your cells go into survival mode. In fact, your entire body does. So your body says, well, famine. We can't find food. So we don't have the resources to keep dividing. So the cells stop dividing. Cells can only divide a finite amount of time. So you don't want them to divide quickly. You want to slow down cell division. That's the first thing. And we'll talk more about cell division and telomeres after this. But so fasting causes your cells to stop dividing. It also causes the body to purge dysfunctional cells. So in your tissues, all throughout your body, because you've got trillions of cells, I can guarantee you a few million at least are not functioning properly. And so they haven't undergone what we call apoptosis or programmed cell death. They're just lingering in the tissues, and sometimes they're misfiring and they're shooting out exosomes and signals and things that they shouldn't be causing, which can cause disease, or it can cause, you might see it as strange blemishes on people's skin and things like this. So you want to purge those from the body. Now, when the body is not getting food, it says, hey, we can't afford to feed you anymore. We've got to purge you. And it kicks into action the purging mechanism, and it purges these senescent cells from the body. There's also some supplements you can take to purge senescent cells, and we'll get to that later as well. But the rejuvenation effect happens with fasting when you start eating again. So after you've fasted, say for 18 hours, your body has purged any senescent cells that may be lingering. It has stopped cell division. But when you start eating again, and hopefully you're going to eat healthy, the cells say, well, we can divide because we need to keep dividing to keep rate going. So they start dividing again. But this time, when they divide, you've got a brand new cell here, which is nice and healthy, and it divides, bang. And now you've got a rejuvenated cell, a brand new cell here as well. But any of the old cells have been purged and they're gone. Now, these two cells here, inside them, you have the nucleus, and that's where the DNA is. And the DNA obviously contains all your genes, and all genes are like mini instruction books to make proteins. So those little strips of RNA get pushed out of the nucleus, and then proteins are made inside the cell, and then they're pushed out into the body. But now you're rejuvenating because you're not getting old cells to do this, which could have genomic instability or other issues because they've been around for too long or they just weren't purged. Now you've just got brand new cells doing this. So it's a rejuvenation effect. When you fast, not only does your blood sugar drop, not only do you lose weight, and interestingly, you actually have more energy because you're not having a sugar crash when you don't eat all the time. But yeah, it's a rejuvenation effect. It allows your tissues to get brand new strips of RNA or protein to rebuild with, and it actually rejuvenates, and we know this. So this is proven across all organisms. It's quite fascinating. There's a ton of research going on at the moment about what exactly is the best fasting methods to use. I do have a book out which goes into. Can I do a shameless plug, Joe? I'll just give you the name of that book.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it, mate. Yeah, not a problem.
So
yeah, sure.
I do have a book out, and it's called the Anti-Aging Toolkit. You can find that on Amazon. But so I go into various fasting techniques in there. Fasting techniques are always going to be, I think, under the microscope, pun intended, because people want to really hone this mechanism that the human body has. And but if you are traveling and you can't fast for some reason, you just may not be in a position where you can fast. So there is other things you can do. And one of them is to take a drug called metformin. Now, metformin is a diabetic drug. It's only meant for diabetics. It's been around for over 50 years. It's extremely well tolerated, and it has an incredible safety record. I take about 1,000 milligrams of metformin every day. So I fast. I do my mountain climbers. I also work out. I eat foods which are very low in sugar or have a very low GI index because I want to remain as close to fasting state as possible. But what metformin does, when you take metformin, it slows down the release of sugar from the liver. When I say sugar, I'm talking about glucose. And so the blood isn't getting any glucose. Now, that tricks the cells into thinking that there's a famine. The cells go, where's our glucose? We need energy. Ray must be in a place of starvation. He can't eat. So we need to go into survival mode. We need to purge all the dysfunctional cells. We need to stop cell division. And of course, when I start eating later in the day, or having a dinner, or at night time when the metformin wears off, my cells go, hey, there's food back. Let's start dividing and rebuilding tissues, but this time from a rejuvenated state. So metformin is classified as a fasting mimetic because it mimics fasting. And there is another one out there, which is probably outdoing metformin, which I don't take at the moment, and I'll tell you why. It's called rapamycin. That's spelled RAPAMYCIN, rapamycin. Rapamycin does everything that metformin can do, but it's also showing promises in other areas too when it comes to anti-aging. For example, older people who get into their 60s and 70s, when they pass away, scientists get their muscles and we look at them, and we see that in between the muscle fibers is lots of fat. That just happens in older people. People on rapamycin don't have this. So older people on rapamycin, the fat's not there. It's rejuvenating the muscles and maintaining youth. However, the reason I haven't started using rapamycin yet, and probably won't until COVID blows over, is because it's an immunosuppressant. So you don't want your immune system suppressed unless you've had COVID and unless you've had your double shot of vax. And I know there's probably people on here that maybe don't like vaccinations, but because rapamycin is an immunosuppressant, it's something I won't touch at the moment. I might consider it later to see from its benefits. But yeah, rapamycin has a lot of benefits. I'm just not on that yet. And
does that actually help with weight loss as well by not building the fat between the muscles?
It probably does. I would say it probably does because if it's blocking glucose being released from the liver in the same way metformin does, then that's less glucose that your body can store as fat. However, if you're binge eating, you're always going to put on weight. And I've got a friend in Silicon Valley. He's a biogerontologist, so he studies this field as well. He's from Cambridge University in England, but he's now based in Silicon Valley. He estimates biological escape velocity. He thinks it would be here by 2022. If you look at all the science, genetic engineering, and all this other stuff, he can make a very good argument that it's already here. Other scientists will say 2030. But he said to me that through his findings and his research, the number one way to speed up the aging process is to hold excessive weight. So if you can start fasting and lose any excess weight that your body shouldn't be carrying, the evidence clearly shows that you will live longer. And I guess that's why when you go to an old people's home, there's really nobody in there over the age of maybe 68, 69 who's carrying excessive weight. They're all very, very lean people. And there's a lot of other reasons that holding excessive weight can kill you, but it does seem to shorten lifespan. There's no doubt about it. And we're not talking about obesity. We're just talking about maybe a bit of.
Well, you're talking about old, frail people that they're really skinny and frail. I totally get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So you just won't, but you won't see any of them carrying excessive weight. People at that age are just not fat. If they were fat, they've died. They don't lose weight and become frail and skinny. The ones that were holding more weight, they just never made it to those ages. That's what we find when we look at the numbers.
Okay. So I have some questions for you, man. One of them is they're all rattling as I'm going through. Let's start with ketosis, with keto diets, right? I'll just give you a little update of myself. Just after mid this year, I was having some chest pains. Nothing that felt too bad. Progressively got worse over a couple of days to the point where it was pretty bad. Ended up going to hospital and realized that I was having heart attacks for a couple of days. So I'm 40, man. I had a heart attacks. Had to get a stent put in my heart. Right. That was a big life-changing thing for me, of course. A couple of years prior, I'd done the ketosis diet, and it was something that I was probably worried about maybe contributing to the high cholesterol in the heart attack diet, right? And that was a range of fasting in the morning. I did have the bulletproof coffee though in the morning, which had the butter in the coffee, right? Which I really used to thrive on that. I used to kickstart me for the day. Like it was like taking a line of speed or something. It was just like off you go, right?
Yep.
And then I had so much energy at that point in time. It was unreal, man. I would work from home and on the road with the businesses I lived in Thailand. I'd get back. I was always on the go. I'd go to bed late-ish, 11, maybe 11-ish, and I'd still wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning. So I'm having 4 or 5 hours sleep, and when I was hitting the sack at night, I was going straight to sleep. So I was sleeping well, and then waking up and doing these long days. And I'd never felt so good in my life maybe besides when I was in the army and I was really fit as a kid, right? I've never been able to get that back since. And even since this heart attack, I've been feeling so flat. I just can't get my energy about me. I just can't get enough sleep now these days, especially since this heart attack. And I really want to change diet, but I of course, there's eating healthy, but I like the high fat diet of good keto, not bad keto, right? That was giving me the energy burn, but I'm too worried to do that because of what's happened. What are your recommendations on keto? How does that affect this whole process with the fasting? I'm worried about, I'm curious about a few things. So could you update me on that first before we go into a whole bunch of other questions?
Yeah, sure. So if you're going to do a keto diet, you want to make sure it's plant-based. There's a fascinating study. In fact, it's in my book again, so I'm going to do this. You got to read this book.
Do that, please. Yeah, please. The Anti-Aging Toolkit, and you can find that on Amazon. Did you say?
You can find that on Amazon. Yeah. So the reason I showed the book is because what I'm about to say is in the book. Heart attacks, believe it or not, and heart disease is 100% self-inflicted. And I know that's a horrible thing to say, but it's inflicted from our Western diets. We have been programmed to believe that food should be a form of comfort and entertainment as opposed to something there to sustain us and give us energy. That's all food is there to sustain us and give us energy. But when you look at the way these companies advertise food on the TV, they make food almost appear like a circus or a form of entertainment where it's going to be so much fun to go to McDonald's and eat this food and eat that food. But man, they're killing us. And there's a scientist in America, Dr. Eccleston, and he's a fantastic scientist. What he did was he looks at the American diet, which is terrible, and people that were coming in they had huge blockages in their arteries. They were needing quadruple bypasses. He instead would make them go vegetarian, and he would X-ray the arteries. X-ray their arteries so you could see the blockages. And I say you could see them because there's actually a video of this on YouTube. It's called The Last Heart Attack, and it's done by CNN. So just Google that. It goes for about 11 minutes. So after the podcast, it's really worth looking. If you've got a history of heart disease in your family or yourself, this is something that I cannot stress enough. Everyone needs to watch, because heart disease it could be a thing of the past tomorrow. If government said, right, that's it, no more foods that can cause heart disease, mate, there'll be no more heart attacks. Heart attacks are caused by our lifestyle. And so when Dr. Eccleston, when he gets people to eat all the right vegetables and he takes them off animal products, the blockages completely disappear within a few months. So every day your body has an ability to remove plaques from the arteries. They're not permanent. They're not there forever.
I thought they were permanent. Yeah.
No, that's kind
lifestyle. Of the information I thought I was getting, is that once you've got it, you can't, I thought, why can't they just drill or scrape the plaque off, right? And they're like, no, that's within your arteries, between the skin in your artery, and that's there. So the stent holds it open. The blood flow can go through, and you've got that for life. So take cholesterol tablets and all these things to keep it down. But you're saying not the case. Not
the case. Not according to the latest science. I understand that this is what people have been thinking. In fact, Joe, it's interesting you say that, because even in that 11-minute video with Dr. Eccleston, this is one of the questions that's put to him. The guy interviewing him, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who works for CNN, he says, but we thought these were permanent. Like, once you've got them for life. Try not to let them get worse. This is what they say in that video. Exactly what you just said there. But no, the evidence now clearly shows that if you're not eating the wrong foods and you're eating the right foods, the body heals itself and the body knows how to get all this stuff out. So, and that's why the article on CNN was called The Last Heart Attack, because Dr. Eccleston makes the claim that America does not ever have to have another heart attack again if society went on this diet. The problem is we have been so spoiled with tasty foods, and we all look at food as comfort and fun. When we go out, if we would go to a restaurant, how many people listening to this podcast now look at the menu and say, right, I'm going to get the healthiest thing on here? No. We all look at the most tastiest thing that we prefer. That's probably how most people think. So that's how we are as humans. But that is faulty thinking. That's misguided. And we don't teach our kids to think. We teach our kids to think like that, as opposed to what's the healthiest thing on there. So really, when I go to a restaurant, I'm guilty too. I'm not some saint that can preach. I make mistakes. I go to a restaurant and I see there's a big, beautiful
Well, it's
salad
a
there.
lifetime of thinking that way that you have to break. It's not easy, you know.
It is a lifetime, and I tell you, it's interesting you say that because I've stopped eating dinner. I don't eat dinner or breakfast, so I have a big lunch, and then I graze up until about 6 p.m. and then that's it. And it's interesting because when I first started doing that, I was so culturally conditioned to expecting food at around 7 o'clock, 6, 7 o'clock. Where's my big bowl of food? Where is it? Where is it? It kind of felt weird. It felt like something was missing from my life, but I wasn't even hungry. But the behavioral programming I had from being a kid was telling me you should be eating, even though I wasn't hungry. So now, I just don't eat breakfast and I don't eat dinner. And for me personally, I can tell I do not have a dad bod, which I love. So, and
I have, ladies and gentlemen, got the dad bod. So yeah, if you want to trade off and rate himself,
I haven't met Joe in person yet, so I don't know. But
when you do, you can rub my belly and confirm that. All right. But all right. So this is interesting, man, because I'm gonna really, because this podcast is far from finished, but I'm gonna say after this podcast, we're gonna connect, and I'm gonna ask you for lots of tips and advice to trying to get my health back to where it was, so that there are no more heart attacks. For one, my dad's really into trying to find information at the moment for his longevity of life. He's I think he's thinking every day could be his last, as we never know. And I'm sure he's not watching this live now, but he definitely wants to watch this podcast after we're done.
Right.
So I'm going to start taking the advice, and I've been told a lot since this heart attack about fasting, but never to the detail of what you're saying now. So it makes a lot more sense with what you're saying. And speaking of fasting, is another question I had. Have you ever heard of that guy? I don't know his name. He was a really hugely obesely overweight guy many years ago, and he fasted for something like 388 days, over a year, with nothing but water. Did you ever hear about this particular?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
But that's interesting. If he managed to do that.
Yeah. So he'd go to the bathroom like once every 2 months or something, right? And he ended up he was morbidly obese, and over this 300 and don't quote the exact days, 380 something days. I think it was 388, just over a year. He had actually shrunk right down to a thin looking normal person, but without all the skin lag as well. So his body was able to just consume those cells at a good rate that he didn't have the flabby skin or the bat wings, as we say. And he was looking fantastic. I don't know what his progress was after that. This was quite a while ago, I think, before internet was really established. So it wasn't well documented, although you can find it and you can see pictures of him and his progress along the way. But I found that fascinating. At first I thought, surely if you don't eat for a week, you'll die. But it's not the case. Many people do different types of fastings up to a week or two. They even do 2 weeks as a common thing with some people. I know a friend of mine, he'd do a 3-day fast all the time. And he's quite overweight, but he'll shed some kilos in that time. By doing this with the fasting for periods and then eating again and then fasting again isn't too much shock for your body. It doesn't do damage, actually doing good is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and what you just said at the end there, it doesn't shock the body, and it doesn't do damage. Believe it or not, you just touched on something that all longevitists or immortalists like me, not that I think I'm going to be immortal, but it's a nickname that we have for each other. The interesting thing about the human body is it needs to be stressed. It wants to be stressed in order to be healthy. Popular belief would say that if I lay on the couch, don't use my body, don't risk injury, don't move it at all, and just eat as many nutrients as I can all day long. Well, logic would suggest that I'm going to be the healthiest thing on the planet because, hey, I'm not wearing my body out, I'm not using it, and I'm eating as many nutrients as I can. But the exact opposite is true. We know that exercise is one of the most important things you can do, especially in old age, to resist frailty. And it's also one of the healthiest things you can do when you're young as well, exercise. So stressing the body is really important. And also fasting, not eating. don't go throwing as much food down your throat as possible, because it will kill you in the end, or it will certainly make you unhealthy and give you all sorts of health conditions. So we know this is called hormesis. Hormesis is where you stress certain facets of the body and you get a great result. But you should only do it in small doses. So you're not going to go for a 50-kilometer run every day, because your knees are going to wear out and you're going to have a lot of other issues as well, probably heart attacks and things. But along those lines. So, but small measured doses of stress are really healthy for you. For example, sunlight. If you go out in the sun and you're in that sun for 12 hours on a 40-degree day, you're going to get skin cancer, or you're certainly going to burn, and you're going to have a lot of issues from that. But if you go out in the sun for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and you'll get some vitamin D, it's healthy. So biochemistry is a fascinating beast. People seem to think that if you were told green tea is good for you, and it is, and then you see a health food shop selling green tea capsules, and those capsules on the label of that bottle, it might say, hey, 1 capsule is the same as having 10 green teas. People might say, wow, I can have 1 capsule and it's the same as having 10 green teas. Well, I'm not saying that that's safe. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not up to date with the research. It's just an example. But if you take that capsule, you think, okay, well, I've just had 10 green teas and I know 1 green tea is really healthy for me. Well, 10 green teas might be very toxic. And there has actually been people who've had really serious liver damage from taking green tea powder, because there's something out there where people don't realize that the human body is not like it's not like charging up a battery in a car or filling up a petrol tank, where the more the better. There's a limit to how much you can ingest of something. So something can be very healthy, but you go over a certain limit and it becomes very toxic. This is called hormesis. So small, and interestingly, green tea comes under the heading of hormesis. And the reason for that is green tea actually has some things in it which you could say are poisonous and are toxic, but they're not toxic enough to cause any damage. But what happens is, when the body detects green tea in your stomach, the cells that work down there, they go into survival mode, but it's a different type of survival mode from fasting. And they release things like, I'll name some things. One's called superoxide dismutase, another one's called glutathione. And these are some of the most powerful antioxidants known to humans. And the human body produces them all the time. They taper off with age. And but when you have things like green tea, the cells start releasing all these super, super powerful antioxidants to get some of those bad things in the green tea out of your body. Now, the green tea can't cause any damage, but those super, super powerful antioxidants that your body starts releasing go through the entire body, not just to get rid of the green tea. And now they're killing all these other things, or removing all these other impurities from the blood. So this is why drinking things like green tea is good. And that comes under the heading of hormesis. So yeah, that sort of stuff's I cover in the book as well. If people want more of a detail, I'm not trying to plug the book again. I'm just
plug the book as much as you need to, because it's good to. No, it's totally fine. And this is a reference for us to go back and look at where we can find this. And again, you can hold your book up every time you talk about this. Fine, and sure. We can find this on Amazon for any of the listeners. Again, the name of the book there, Ray?
Oh, it's called The Anti-Aging Toolkit.
The Anti-Aging Toolkit, which you can find on Amazon. So go ahead and order that if you want to know more as well. But we are talking about it on this podcast, and this is going to be a bit of a regular thing. We'll probably do once every month or so. We're going to jump on here and talk about this. But I want to go back to, again, the ketosis. When you said about doing ketosis, it's important to do a plant-based ketosis diet rather than, I suppose they call it dirty keto, right? With butters and things like that. You're talking about like olive oils and avocados as your fats.
Yep.
You still need some sort of protein in there as well, though. Are you trying to talk about getting the protein from still fruits, or not fruits, but vegetables?
So this is a fascinating question, and I'll tell you why. You've opened a rabbit hole, and people listening to this podcast are going to be mortified by what I'm about to say. They're going to be mortified by what I'm about to say. Human body does not need protein to build muscle. It does not need protein to live. And we've all been subject to decades of very, 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 very clever food industry marketing. And I'm going to explain why you don't need protein. And then I'm going to explain how protein speeds up the aging process and why I never eat it. So protein is made from amino acids. amino acids, and there's about 22 amino acids that the human body requires. So yeah, absolutely. When you eat protein, you break down those amino acids, and your body can then use those amino acids to build muscle. And so we see things like protein shakes. People eat steak and chicken to build muscle, and it will build muscle. I'm not saying it won't. I'm not saying you can't eat it, but it's interesting because I've done a lot of talks in longevity for various groups, and when people hear this for the first time, it kind of shatters the paradigm that they've been living in. They're saying, hang on, I drink a protein shake every day. I have a steak for dinner every night. What do you mean you don't need protein? Of course you need protein. Well, all you actually need are amino acids. People say to me, well, where do you get your protein from, Ray? I tell them I get my protein from exactly the same place that elephants, gorillas, rhinoceros, horses, all these huge land animals eat leaves, because leaves are packed with amino acids. And the amino acids in leaves are much more available and easier to digest or to extract than the amino acids that are locked away in meat. And if you're cooking the meat, you're actually damaging a lot of those amino acids. And if you're cooking the meat, especially if the meat gets brown, that's called the Maillard effect. If the meat starts to get brown or even black, then it becomes a class 1 carcinogenic. That black stuff on meat is known as a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, which causes cancer. So this is why meat is we know there's a huge connection between meat and prostate cancer and other cancers that are currently under investigation. But there's other things in meat as well, like homocysteine, where it raises your homocysteine levels, which goes on to cause heart disease. It also contains something called advanced glycation end products, which speed up the aging process of cells, because these little fats, they bind to the surface of the cells. And if that's a cell and these little fats start to hop on the outside of it, that cell now can't communicate with other cells in the surrounding area. So we see this a lot in carnivorous people. When we look at the type of cells they've got, it's what we call glycated. All their cells are glycated. Now, you can reverse glycation, but it takes a plant-based diet to do it. So I hate to tell people this because I know some people don't want to hear it.
I'm a carnivore, man. I am a fucking carnivore. My dad was a butcher when I was growing up, and we used to have meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that's what I'm used to, like vegetables, yeah, maybe I'll have them one day. That's my thought, and I do know it's the importance of it.
Yep.
I didn't know that just having plant-based diets only would be as superficial as for what you need without having meat. I thought that was an important part. Still, even when vegans are going out and blasting the vegan track, I still thought, no, you still got to have a bit of meat in you, But
Yep.
Is it not true that people that are vegans still need to take some other sort of supplements because of the lack of protein they might be getting? I've heard that.
Yeah, so that's right. So there are studies out there which show that certain vegan diets or vegans are low in vitamin B12. So if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, you can always supplement with that. One of the reasons for that, I believe, and I'm no expert on that, but one of the reasons for that, I believe, is because the way the way vegetables are farmed these days, vitamin B12 used to be ubiquitous in the soil 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Now it's not. So when we're getting these vegetables and they're washed as well, believe it or not, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of nutrients in dust. That's why plants can grow in dirt, because it's full of nutrients. So 1,000 years ago or 100 years ago, if you were a vegan or a vegetarian and you didn't have access to farm animals and you were just eating plants off the land, a lot of the dirt that those plants were covered in actually contained a lot of nutrients. But we don't have that anymore. So the human diet has changed from an evolutionary perspective, and it'll never go back to that. And look, and I'm not saying you can't enjoy a steak one day.
Sure, you're just saying that it's not necessary, but enjoy it if you want, but you don't have to have that as protein because your body can do it with other ways.
I'm saying, and I'm saying cut it down as well. So if you don't eat 3 steaks a week, I would eat. If I was going to eat steak, if I felt the urge to have it, I'd have it more like once a month. And I've got a friend. His name's Brian. He's had about 3 or 4 heart attacks. He's in his 60s. And of course, his wife just makes him steak every night. And I told him, I've showed him the science. I've actually gone on to the National Institute of Health, pubmed.gov, which stands for Published Medicine, the National Library of Medicine. These are all the databases for the highest standing for peer-reviewed scientific data or studies. And I send him studies to kind of wake him up because I want him to live and I don't want him to kill himself with his diet. So he said, I'm going to cut down to twice a week, Ray. And I said, well, twice a month would be better for you. But look, twice a week, at the end of the day, some people can, some people can't. But I love meat too.
It's really it's a manly thing, right? Like, I mean, I feel like eating a steak is like, I need to do it as a man. Like, I've got raised knuckles because I'm walking around eating steak, just dragging my hands on the floor. But it is an eye opener that we do need to. Things need to be more plant-based. I'm still getting my head around it just being plant-based only. I understand the information behind it. I've heard conflicting information too, but it makes a lot of sense in what you're saying here today. So, it's something I want to actually try, even if it's at least a 6-month period. I want to try and stick to that just to see how I feel compared from now until then, because I'm not feeling that great. I used to feel really good, and I don't feel that since this attack I had, and I can't really get back on my wagon from it. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with medication from this heart attack. I was on different kinds of medication, and one of them was I was totally out of breath walking. Like, if I walked 5 or 6 fast paces, I'd be like I'd have to take a breath as though I'd done a little jog up and down for doing almost nothing, and also extremely tired. Could not get enough sleep, having to sleep during the day. I said to the doctor after a couple of months, this isn't right. I don't feel right at all. They changed one medication. I took the last of that medication one evening. The next morning from the change, instantly different. The shortness of breath was gone. I wasn't tired the same in any way, but there's still an element of tiredness there, right? Like, it's always there that I can't shake, and that's been since the heart attack. So now I'm not sure if it's the medication, if it's any heart damage, whatever it is. But all I do know for sure is the answer is down to exercise and diet. And I'm trying to figure out what that is now for me so that I can continue to not feel so shitty. I want to get back into bursting out of my skin.
So how old are you, Joe?
40.
40. Okay. So that's a very young age to have a heart attack.
It is. Yep.
My dad had a heart attack at 41 and died when I was about 8 years old. So growing up, I have been hyper aware of mortality and how fragile human life is. He died, I think it was 1982, so a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Having a heart attack at 40 or at your age, that's an early warning sign. And I think if you've been used to eating meat all your life, it's gonna, it can be difficult to wean yourself off that. There are some meat alternatives out there, like beyond meat and Impossible Foods. There's some fantastic meat alternatives. When I first started to wean myself off meat, I used some of those meat substitutes because it just made me feel like I was eating meat. But now I never think about it. It's kind of interesting. I wake up, I wait till lunchtime before I eat. My first meal of the day is usually a banana, and just because they're sitting there and they're easy to get, I don't have to prepare them. It doesn't take any time. And I have a bowl of walnuts sitting in the kitchen. I pick at those, and so. It's kind of weird how you going plant-based. It can take a month or two to rewire the neural networks, but after a while, it becomes easy. So I would say, as far as fasting goes, or changing your diet to a more plant-based diet, don't go cold turkey. Do it slowly, and just maybe start with things like tomato soup, mushroom soup. Find soups you like, and so instead of having a steak tonight, you have mushroom soup instead with some bread. Things like that. And you slowly increase the amount of vegetarian meals you're having as opposed to carnivorous meals. And you'll find that the transition over a month or two is easier than you think. You won't even notice it. And vegetables are packed with water. Okay, so if you dry vegetables out, properly, they will weigh maybe 1/10 of what they weighed when they had water in it. Which means when you eat vegetables, you're mostly eating water most of the time, depending on the vegetable. And this is great for weight loss as well, because these vegetables will make you feel full, and but you're not really full. It's actually just mostly water that you're holding, and or that you're eating. So you've got the vegetables packed with nutrients, nothing toxic in them, like that's going to cause cholesterol or homocysteine and these other things that you don't want in your blood. So that's why vegetables are so good, but also they're packed with water. And on that note, it's easy. If you eat scientifically, you could lose, believe it or not, 3 to 5 kilos in 1 week. Now, I know your listeners will be going, that's impossible, we can't do that. Well, science says you can, and you can, but it's not going to be fat, it's going to be water retention. And I would argue that most people who carry a little bit of extra weight, it's not really fat, it's water retention. And what causes water retention are starchy foods like rice, bread, pasta, potatoes, and breakfast cereals.
Stop. You're all my favorite foods. Stop.
There you go. Now,
Yeah.
now for every gram of those starchy foods you eat, your body has to hold 3 grams of water. Okay, so if you eat 100 grams of some starchy food for lunch, you're going to hold 300 grams of water. Eat 3 meals like that a day, and you're almost holding an extra litre of water. And that water on a male is going to be around the stomach. A whole litre. Think what a litre bottle looks like. Now, if you're eating like that for 2 or 3 days, there's going to be 3 or 4 litres of water around your gut. Okay. The second you stop eating like that, and you stop eating those starchy foods, and your body processes those foods and they exit the body, so will the water. And this is why if you eat scientifically, within 3 or 4 days, you can lose 3 or 4 kilos, but it's only water retention. But for people that do want to lose that extra weight and look good, and obviously this is fantastic for females that want to quickly purge some weight, eat things like, for lunch, have some fried mushrooms with some fried tomatoes and maybe an egg, right? You don't have to have the egg if you're vegetarian, but have enough mushrooms and tomatoes so you feel good and you feel full. You can put other vegetables, put some spinach in it, whatever you like, and get creative. But you eat those types of foods as opposed to starchy foods, and weigh yourself actually on the scales before you start this diet, and in 4 or 5 days, and watch how many kilos you can lose in 3 or 4 days. It's quite fascinating, and people are kind of blown away. They never thought they could lose 3 or 4 kilos in 3 or 4 days, but it's absolutely possible if you eat scientifically.
Yeah. So doing the keto diet, I lost about 15 kilos in 7 weeks, just over 7 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was amazing.
That's amazing.
It was something like 400 grams a day, was just flying off, almost half a kilo a day, which was great. I felt so good. But the thing is that it started off clean, like you're talking about, more plant-based. It had the macronutrients, micronutrients involved. I was I was living in Thailand at the time, so I did a deal with one of the chefs and said, listen, make me 2 meals a day. I don't care what they are. I'm going to come in, and I kind of fasted with it. So I'd have my bulletproof coffee in the morning. When I woke up, then I'd have nothing until 12 o'clock. I'd have my first meal, and I'd have my second one before 6 o'clock too. And they were mainly plant-based, but then it was just costing me a bit after a while, and I was getting into it. I was losing weight. I started replacing one of the meals that he would make, but I'd make my own with one, and he'd have one. And then in time, I was like, I can do this. But then I kind of lost my way. I didn't know how to measure. You're supposed to measure the different parts of the food, right? How much protein. I didn't know how to do all that, so I was just doing things like chicken breast with butter, cooked in butter, and broccoli or whatever it was. And I was still shedding the weight. I'm like, this is amazing. I can easily do this. Not a problem. Did break ketosis a couple of times, which is one of my questions about going in and out of ketosis. And I'm sorry to be harping on ketosis. It's just that I've been through this, and it seems to line up with the fasting, right? But going in and out of ketosis, one question I'm going to have just after this is why is this dangerous? Because everyone says it's dangerous and no one can give an answer why. But back to what I was saying is that I was still shedding that weight with all the sort of bad fats, saturated fats and so forth. And I did wonder if that had an effect towards the heart attack. That was from a couple of years ago. It probably most likely did. So making it plant-based can going back on these diets as plant-based diets reverse the effects of what's happened, as you said, clear the body out, deplaque the body, because the body's got the potential to do that, because that's news to me. That's one question. And the other one is about going in and out of ketosis. So you're aware of what effect that has on the body.
Yeah, so the evidence clearly shows me, that a plant-based diet and ketosis is not dangerous. The body starts producing ketones when you don't eat food and when you need energy. So, and it can also make you feel a little bit dizzy, a little bit lightheaded. If the body's not used to it, can it cause fainting and things like that. If the body's not extracting fat quick enough, it's possible. As a scientist, I'm never going to say 100% it is this or 100% it's that. I can't guarantee the sun's going to go down today or the sun's going to rise tomorrow. The evidence clearly shows it probably will. That's how scientists talk. But we always leave room for error. And because, science it's a really, when it comes down to it, it's extremely, extremely educated guessing game where we observe things and we set up experiments and we observe. And then we come up with a hypothesis of why something is actually happening. But sometimes they're wrong. And the reason why something is happening can be completely wrong. But I think ketosis is good. And I would just think if you've got a history of heart disease in your family, certainly you've got to get away from animal products. You just do. And when you see that show, The Last Heart Attack, it captures it so lucidly. It shows the science in layman's terms in such an easy way. This is why I use this analogy. I'm the kind of guy that's embedded in scientific studies. They're written in foreign languages that most people wouldn't want to read. So they're not for the everyday public. And, I get that. So this is why I kind of recommend a YouTube video, which is done by CNN, because it's very, very easily digestible for people to watch and understand. But with ketosis and with losing weight, there's three things everybody watching this should know. The human body can only get energy from three places, okay? And that is your fat stores, okay, on a man, usually around the stomach. Your carbohydrate battery, that is the glucose that is floating around in your blood, and also your stomach, food you just eaten, all right? So when you want to lose weight, you need to make sure there is no food in your stomach. This is why professional athletes, especially boxers and long distance runners, they all train at 5 o'clock in the morning. They don't eat any food. They just go out and train, because what that means is there's no food in their stomach, which is readily available to break down for energy. After the first few minutes of exercise, their carbohydrate battery, or the glucose in their blood, is now depleted, right? And now the body has to start accessing the third place, the fat reserves. You can't get to this one unless the first two are depleted. So this is why fasting from, say, I fast from 6 p.m. till lunchtime every day, except the weekends. Okay, that's my time off. And you can have I so from Friday night till Sunday evening, I'm not fasting. I'm having a great time eating whatever I want and drinking whatever I want. But Monday to Thursday, I try and be as strict as I can on that. Obviously, there's exceptions: Christmas parties, birthdays. Someone pops over for a glass of wine. It's no big deal for me. I'm at the weight I want to be, so I can fall off the wagon. But if you want to lose weight, you need to make sure there is no food in your stomach, and you need to make sure there is no glucose floating around your blood. The body can only then get energy from converting fat into ketones, and that's where that's ketosis, right? So that's where you're at now. There's a couple of chemicals or hormones that float around the blood, and it's really good to know this. Insulin is a hormone that tells your body to store food as fat. Now, you don't want that. You don't want to store food as fat. If you're going to eat food, theoretically, we want it to go straight through us. We don't want to get it stored as fat. Who wants that? But insulin does that. So how do you keep your insulin low? Well, you don't eat starchy foods for a start. I'm going to just quickly define what sugar is, okay? Most people think sugar is a white crystalline powder that they used to put in their tea or coffee, okay? Sugar comes in many forms, okay? Sugar is also glucose. Glucose is a high energy sugar molecule. That's what glucose is. And foods like pastas, breakfast cereals, potatoes, rice, bread is packed with glucose. And that's just a polite way of saying it's packed with sugar. When you eat those foods, you're eating sugars. And it's way too much for the body to really use. So it stores it as fat. When you eat those high sugary foods, even like soft drinks, which are not diet, anything that's got a lot of sugar in it, wine as well, and even grapes have a lot of sugar in, believe it or not, fructose instead of glucose. In fruit, it's called fructose. These trigger insulin, and your insulin levels spike and go right up here to combat the sugar, because your sugar levels are up here, so now insulin needs to be up here. Insulin now tells your body to get all this food and lock it away as fat, okay? So you don't want that. So if you're eating foods like I'm recommending, so like for lunch I might have fried fried mushrooms, fried tomatoes, a handful of spinach in there, maybe an egg. If you eat foods that don't spike insulin, have hardly any sugar inside them, then your insulin just rises a very, very small amount, but it goes straight back down. And I'm not locking away fat. Now there's another hormone, the opposite of insulin, and this is what you want. It's called glucagon, right? Glucagon is the hormone that tells your body to burn stored fat, right? So you need your glucagon levels up here. So when your insulin levels are non-existent, your glucagon levels are naturally high all the time. So you don't have to do anything to make them high except stop eating sugar. And when I say sugar, talking pasta, bread, rice, and all the other things I've mentioned. So for me, when I drink a beer, I always drink low-carb beers because the less sugar, I try and consume, put it this way, I try and consume as least amount of calories as possible. So if you ask me, would I prefer a soft drink with sugar or artificial sweeteners? I will always reach for the artificial sweetener, but I don't drink soft drinks, okay? But I'm just giving you an analogy. Yeah, it is. And a lot of people think that natural is better. A lot of people who have been tricked, just like they have with the meat industry, they think that natural is always the best alternative. And I would say that natural is now a dirty word because arsenic is natural. You can find it in the ground. You can find it in the seeds of apples and things like that. That's arsenic. Cyanide is natural. You can find it in nature. Asbestos is natural. You're not going to eat any of that. Cancer is natural, right? So, but you're going to fight that at all costs. So don't be tricked when you think people say, oh, but sugar's natural. It's much better than artificial sweetener. When it comes to longevity, I would argue that anything that spikes your insulin levels is not conducive to longevity, and it's not conducive to fasting. So that's why I would opt to use artificial sweeteners, and that's if you needed artificial sweeteners. Hopefully you can wean yourself off that taste of anything sweet, because interestingly, taste buds are like eyes. And when you're in a dark room for a few hours and you go outside, the light is so bright, like, wow, that sun is so bright, I need sunglasses, right? Because your eyes adjust. And believe it or not, so do taste buds. It might just take a little bit longer. It might take a month or two. But I hate the taste of broccoli. I hate broccoli. I hate it with a passion. If broccoli was a living life form from space, I would fight it because I hate it. And but I can tell you, broccoli's got a compound in it which is really, really important for a process in anti-aging called epigenetic drift, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. But broccoli, I hate it, and that's the reason I eat it. Now I can eat it raw now. I couldn't do that a year ago. It would make me dry reach. Now I do have protein shakes, by the way. It's vegetarian protein, but I have protein shakes. I put my broccoli in it. I blend it up in a Nutribullet and I drink it. And I can't even taste the broccoli. But what happens is, what's happened now, I have found, is something I never ever knew was going to happen. And because I don't eat any sweetness, I don't eat any sugar at all, and my diet is 99% plant-based, my taste buds have shifted. And now I think I'm eating the way nature intended me to eat. And that's interesting, because what's happened is, because I'm not blinding my taste buds with high sugary foods anymore. I don't eat cake, I don't eat chocolates and things like this. I mean, I might reach for one if I'm at a party or something and I see a plate and I'll have it, but I won't binge on it because it's just too sweet for me. My taste buds have become hypersensitive to anything with sugar in it. But that also means that when I reach for a carrot, or I reach for a piece of fruit or a vegetable, and I never expected this, it tastes really sweet. It tastes as nature intended it to taste. But because our taste buds have been blinded, but every time we go to a shop and we buy a piece of food, it's packed with salt and it's packed with sugar. Our taste buds become blind to sugar. And then when you go to eat a vegetable, the vegetable tastes, yuck, I can't handle that because there's no sugar in it. It doesn't have a nice salty taste to it. But that's just because your taste buds have been conditioned to eating like that. Once you wean yourself off that and you reach for something, I mean, carrots to me taste like chocolate did to me 3 years ago, but with a carrot flavor, but they're just as sweet. So yeah, it's fascinating to see how I've managed to inadvertently re-educate my taste buds to eating off the land, how nature kind of intended. And when they're like that, it becomes easy because you're not eating bland foods. They're actually exciting. They actually taste good. You just can't taste it because your taste buds have been blinded by high sugary foods. So
interesting. That's really interesting. And so what about cooking these like vegetables, does that break down any of the goodness that you need to have? Like say carrots, right? It's nice to crunch on to chew on a crunchy carrot, but there might be some times I want to like cook it, make it nice, warm, and soft, almost like a mashed potato to replace that, right? Is that destroying some of the nutrients in there by cooking it?
Great question. It does destroy some nutrients. It doesn't destroy all of them. Boiling food is the worst way to prepare food. That takes all the nutrients out. If you're going to do that, drink the water from the pan, and because the nutrients do go into the water. Some of them do break down depending on what the molecule is. However, if you need to cook foods, and we all do, if you want to maintain the nutrient levels in them, cook them slow and low. So, it might say on the packet, when you cook carrots, put them in the oven at 250 degrees for 20 minutes. You might be better to put them in there for 100 degrees maybe for 90 minutes or something like that. I don't know what your oven is, so I can't tell you what time to put them in at. But yeah, cook it slow and low, and do the same with meat. If any of you are going to eat meat, and you desperately got to have that lamb for dinner tonight, or you desperately want to have that steak, the best way to cook meat is slow and low. So don't fry it in the fry pan and have your steak ready in a few minutes like you're used to doing. Put it in the fry pan, put the fry pan lid over it, put it on low, and leave it there for half an hour and let it do it slowly. That's going to prevent the browning effect, which is a class 1 carcinogenic. It's also going to prevent some of the advanced glycation end products that form and a whole heap of other nasties. So cooking things, vegetables and meats, slow and low is the best way to prepare food. As far as heat goes, it maintains a lot of the nutritional value.
Okay. So another question I have is that, with the fasting, and I heard with the ketosis, which I'm kind of somehow bundling this all together because it's still fairly new to me. I don't have a great deep understanding, and this conversation has been extremely helpful. People that do have cancer cells, does fasting kill off cancer cells, or it can kill off cancer cells? I'm getting this theory in my head, people saying, it can kill cells, and it's like someone's got cancer. It's like, right, well, you should just fast and you'll be healed. Is it quite the case, not the case? How does it land like that?
So I wish fasting could do that, but I'm not saying it can't. What I am saying is fasting absolutely slows down the rate at which cancer can proliferate. So cancer cells have really high energy requirements. They need glucose to divide. They need energy to divide. They need all sorts of things. They need amino acids and everything in the blood that the blood has so that they can continue to divide and do what they do. So when you fast and you restrict the amount of glucose in your blood, especially if you do a little bit of HIIT in the morning to purge that carbohydrate battery, so there's no glucose in the blood at all, cancer cells are starved. They are starved. Now, some of them, because there's still a lot of functional machinery in cancer cells, some of them will go into apoptosis, which means programmed cell death, and the fasting will trick them into dying. So you can actually prolong a cancer patient's life by giving them what's called time-restricted feeding, which is the same as fasting, because, you can keep them, you can purge a lot of cancer cells. Now, is it going to be enough for an aggressive cancer that's proliferating really, really quickly? Probably not. But there's a lot of other science coming out now. We now know how cancer cells metastasize and form other tumors around the body. We know what that is. There's a gene. There's a gene that causes that. There's medications now coming out which suppress that gene. So we now know in the next few years, if you get cancer, you're going to be able to take a medication and you're going to be able to hold that cancer in a certain location and prevent it from spreading. And this is great news because it's the metastasizing of cancer which really starts to make cancers, unless it's in the brain or something. But the metastasizing of cancer is really what makes cancer so dangerous. If you can restrict it just to one area of the body so it can't spread, you're a 90% chance of surviving that cancer. If you got cancer 20, 30 years ago, you're a 90% chance of dying. Now, probably if you get cancer now, you are maybe only 25 to 30% chance of dying. So we are winning the battle against cancer, and some of the technologies coming out now. We've got immunotherapy where we can look at a cancer cell in a tumor, we can sequence the DNA and we can see where the mutation is, and then we can, like with a vaccine, we can vaccinate you from that mutation, right? Meaning if your immune cell sees any cell with that genomic code, it kills it. right? So cancer can evade the immune system, but now with immunotherapy, which is tailor-made for individual cancer patients, we can actually program your immune system to go after it. So cancer is on the run. And I would say in 10 years from now, there'll still be cancers and people will still get cancers. But if you get them early enough, cancer could be something which could be eradicated. So it's an exciting time to be in science, to see what's happening, and to know that we're on the cusp of curing a lot of these really bad diseases.
Truly amazing to hear this. You know, my mother's had cancer 6 times, so she's
Wow.
she's come through that, and she's been in remission for a while. I think she's out of that actually. She's doing well. So fingers crossed that goes well. But that scares the whole family. It scares us, our siblings. Our mother is so susceptible to cancer that it might be in our genetics as well. So it's something that we want to watch.
Yep.
But speaking of genetics, it's another field that you specialize in, right?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit more about that. That's fascinating to me. When my dad's always had birds when I was growing up, right? So he's always had different parrots. He had racing pigeons. Like, he's right into the birds. And obviously, when it came to the racing pigeons, you've got to breed different stock lines, of birds that have performed in the past. Even when it was back at the parrots he had when I was young, I think. There was like a new mutant breed, mutant color that came out from some Indian ringnecks. I think they were green, and then there's like yellow ones, and then rare ones that were like blue and white. And now they're so common,
wow.
right? Yeah. So how? I always thought like maybe you can breed like say budgies or parakeets, right? You can breed these 2 colors together and keep breeding their babies and babies till a deformity happens with the color. Then you breed that line back out. I really don't know anything about genetics, although I do find it fascinating in that respect. Give us a little insight on that. And I don't want to divert off the track. I think it kind of all marries back to what we're saying, right? So, give us a little bit more about genetics.
I'm glad you asked about genetics, because genetics will lead on to something else, which is called epigenetics. And I'm going to teach, well, I shouldn't use the word teach, but I'm going to explain what genetics is, and then I'm going to explain what epigenetics is and how they relate to longevity, and how everybody listening here today can actually have control over their genes with some really, really simple supplementation. Because there's genes inside you, we call them oncogenes, but what they are pro-cancer genes. So everybody has pro-cancer genes or oncogenes, and we don't want those genes being transcribed into proteins or being turned on, right? Because they're cancer genes. So we've got other genes called tumor suppressor genes, which kind of shut them down, turn them off. And I'm going to teach you how to do that with foods. I'll teach you, it's called an epigenetic diet. I'm going to teach you that in a minute, but I'll just give you a crash course in genetics. So every cell in your body, which is, would fit on the head of a pin, and probably 50 cells could fit on the head of a pin. Inside each one of those cells, which takes up an area of 10% of the cell, so it's in fact fantastically small, is the nucleus. Inside the nucleus are your chromosomes or your DNA. Now, your DNA, Joe, and my DNA will have about 3 billion base pairs. So when you see that classic double helix with all the lines through it, each line is actually 2 amino acids that are paired like this. And there's only 4 amino acids in there. And I won't bore you with what those amino acids are, but basically there's 3 billion base pairs in this tiny, tiny, tiny little room called the nucleus, which is only 10% of the cell. Now, those genes or those base pairs, which are on that double helix, maybe 1,000 of those base pairs, or we call them ladder rungs, right? Imagine it's a ladder going up a spiral staircase or a spiral ladder. And maybe 1,000 of those base pairs will form one gene, right? So if we took those out and went like this, you'd have all these base pairs, all these different amino acids. It's the sequence of those amino acids that creates proteins, that goes on to create proteins. And the different sequence of amino acids will create different proteins. Now, proteins, I want you to think of proteins not as a piece of meat that you eat at dinner. That is what we've been taught to eat. Proteins are basically mini functional factories that go around and do things. Okay, so there's a protein called klotho. Klotho is made from the gene klotho. So there's a klotho gene, and that's Klotho, if you ever want to learn more about that. Klotho is a rejuvenation gene, right? So when people have high levels of klotho in their body or in their blood, they rejuvenate, they stay young. This is one of the reasons we think parabiosis, using young blood into older organisms, worked, because we think that the young blood contains a lot more clotho than the older organisms. I'm currently working with a biotech startup in Western Australia. I want them to manufacture clotho for me, the clotho protein. I'm going to stick that protein into these things, like exosomes, really, these little tiny cellular sacs. And then I'm looking at ways to get that into the human body. And intranasal spray looks like the best way to do that. So that if you're 40 or 50 or 60, and you want to have more clotho in your blood, I think this would be a great way to do it. I would never promote or design or sell anything that I wouldn't be doing myself. Just know that. So is this stuff safe? Well, the evidence doesn't show it can be dangerous. Could there be a side effect down the track? Could be a side effect from walking your dog down the street. You could get hit by a car. So I can never say no, but these are some of the targets and some of the things and the therapies that we want to bring to market. But getting back to genetics, you've got genes that cause aging, and we've also got genes that cause us to stay young. One of the genes is called the myostatin gene, and the myostatin gene causes muscle loss. And that gene gets turned up. This is called gene expression. That gets turned up as we age, which means you lose more muscle as you age, which is not what you want. You want to resist frailty at all costs. So if you're an older person watching this, or if you're a younger person watching this and you've got a mum and dad or a grandpa out there or a grandma out there, go to your local shop and buy them some 5 kilo weights. Get them some 5 kilo weights for Christmas, okay? And when they're sitting on their couch watching their daily TV shows, I want you to teach them that they've got to do 100 of these and 100 of those and 100 arm curls. They have to resist frailty at all costs, not just for strength, but when you exercise muscles, you release all these fantastic things that we kind of touched on before in hormesis. You release all these fantastic things into the blood, which rejuvenate, and clotho is one of them. So lifting weights or resistance training is extremely important to resist age, and older people need to do it more than younger people. But the myostatin gene, which causes muscle wasting, was a target by a friend of mine, a lady that lives in San Francisco, and her name is Liz Parrish, and she has underwent gene therapy, and I've done genetic editing, so know this. I'll be doing this to myself at some stage in the very near future.
By the way, if you want some guinea pigs along the way, man, I am putting my hand up. Really, I'm funnily enough, for the listeners, Ray and myself live down the road from each other, not even 5 minutes away. So I'm sure we're going to become good friends more so after this podcast. But
it's interesting, isn't it? We haven't met yet. It just turned out that Joe lived 5 minutes from where I live. That was kind of an awesome coincidence.
Yeah. So sorry to cut you off there, but go ahead. So
So basically, what this lady did was she underwent gene therapy, and at the moment, gene therapy, it's a lot of people still think it's fringe. Some people argue it's unsafe, but she had the myostatin gene cut out of her genes. So 37 trillion cells in her body, and the way they did that, and I know people listening are going to have shock horror. They introduced a harmless virus into her bloodstream, and that virus has been programmed with what's called the CRISPR-Cas9 enzyme to enter. The virus actually enters the cell. Viruses have machinery that can enter cells. So we hijack the virus to hijack our own cells. And that virus delivers the genetic editing equipment we want directly into the nucleus. And then that genetic editing equipment, this enzyme called CRISPR-Cas9, it goes through your chromosomes and it looks for a strip of DNA that you've programmed it to look for. And as soon as it finds the right sequence, it snips it out and it cuts it out. So now this lady, Liz Parrish, she will not undergo any muscle wasting. Now, she's the same age as me, and but now she's got a physique like a 25-year-old. Okay, so there's no cellulite on her. There's no her body is just all muscle because she's not wasting away. And if she lifts weights and does some squats or goes for a run and she builds muscle, that muscle will hang around for months, right?
Wow.
Because it doesn't just vanish when you stop training like it does. That's why all of us have to keep training. If I want to have some big arms, I've got to get in the gym. I've got to lift it. But those muscles will only stay there for a week. And if I don't lift again, they're going.
72 hours, right? Muscle starts to decrease after 72 hours, I heard. Is that right?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. I think it's 72 hours after it has rejuvenated and fully rebuilt itself. So once that soreness from the muscle goes, then it's about 72 hours. So all up, you've got about maybe 6.5 days, I think, something like that.
So just for the record, man, I used to do bodybuilding many years ago. I think I was about 26 years old. So we're looking at 14 years. I did it for a good 2 or 3 years. And, I was getting in good shape. And I noticed that when I'd stopped, you sort of fall away. Maybe a year later, you go to train again. That 6 to 8 weeks, you start to really get definition back again quite quickly, But as time's gone on, and you get a little older, I've been at training for 3 months and nothing's happened. You know what I mean? So it's like the older you are, the much less effect it has. There's no really any muscle memory, like people say, so to speak. It takes, I think they say 6 weeks for muscle memory to come back. So something like this, what you're talking about, is extremely beneficial for someone in their older age, at our age, right?
Absolutely. So the reason I look at this and there's other genes I want to cut out of myself as well. None of you listening to this right now maybe settled for your first car forever. You got a car maybe when you were 16 or 17 or 18 maybe, and but then you wanted to upgrade that. You wanted a better car at some stage when you could afford it, and a lot of you may be in a position where you bought that second car and it was a nicer car, because we as humans, we don't settle for things that we don't have to settle for. And we've entered an era where we don't have to settle for the gene pool that we were given. You don't have to do that anymore. So I know that sounds fringe, but this is biohacking in its most purest form. The code that makes me, the code that makes you, Joe, was a code that we didn't have a choice about. We had to accept it 10 years ago. But now we live in a day and age where genetic editing is going to become mainstream. If I said to people 30 years ago that every suburb here in Western Australia was going to have a couple of Botox clinics, people would have laughed at me. I would have said, no. People are going to go in there and they'll get injections in their lips and stuff. And that's going to be mainstream. That'll be normal. If I said that 30 years ago, people would have said, no, you're a crackpot. That will never happen. But it's everywhere, and it's normal, and we don't even bat an eyelid at it. It's the same thing is going to happen with genetic editing. You're going to see clinics popping up all over the world in every suburb in the next 10 years, and you're going to go in there, and it's going to be expensive probably for the first couple of years, like all new technologies are, but the price will come down exponentially, and you'll be able to go in there and you'll be able to say, look, I don't want to lose muscle as I age. I want more clotho. So instead of cutting out a gene, we'll knock in an extra clotho gene. So you've got 2 clotho genes producing twice as much clotho to compensate for the lack of clotho that you're getting. So, there'll be all these therapies out there. Now I could rattle off another 20 genes for which could be great targets in longevity, but I won't. But yeah, so the idea of editing the code that makes you and I is going to happen. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, but that's going to affect the offspring. We're only talking about somatic cells. We're not talking about germ cells. So we don't edit the cells that are in the reproductive organs. So it won't affect the offspring. And that's a really volatile debate as well. Should we do that? Should babies be modified not to have blue eyes, but maybe to be more disease resistant? That's something. Yeah.
So what are you saying there, Ray? You're saying that so someone will make those changes, but they're not happening in the reproductive part, so that when the child is born, they'll still inherit the original genes before yours were modified.
That's right, absolutely. Right. So we're not editing any offspring. No offspring will be edited. It's only my cells and my cells only that I would edit. The technology exists to obviously change germ cells, but we wouldn't be doing that in humans. I don't see any movement currently on the planet where people are trying to do that. There was a Chinese scientist who tried to do it. In fact, he did do it. He edited 2 babies while they were in the womb, and to make them resistant to the AIDS virus. And he was successful in doing that. Yeah, he was successful in doing that. But the Chinese government did not approve, and they put him in prison for a couple of years. So they didn't appreciate that. So,
that was on a program called Unnatural Selection. That was on Netflix. Is that right?
Right. That's right.
Did you get to watch that?
I did watch some of it. I did watch some of it. I think I watched about 3 or 4 episodes of that.
It's fantastic. They're talking about well, what they did do was they got the DNA out of a glow-in-the-dark jellyfish, and they sequenced it together with mice. So some of those babies were glow-in-the-dark babies under a blue light.
Yeah, that's
Others
right.
were just normal. And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, just to think that we're at that day and age, and apparently it's not that difficult if you do have some knowledge to be able to do this sort of CRISPR, to get a CRISPR kit at home. And after a couple of $1,000, you can start to sequence and play with DNA as well at home. Is that right?
That's right. You can. Those CRISPR kits that you can buy online, they're obviously cheap and nasty, but you can do some home experiments to get an idea of what CRISPR is and how to do it. Could you ever use one of those kits to do something to a human? Absolutely not. The CRISPR used to modify an organism like a human is vastly different than a kit you'll buy online to maybe modify a yeast cell. So if you do buy a kit online, don't start injecting some of the ingredients into yourself, because
To try and see in the dark or anything like that. No invisibility skills. All right, fair enough.
Joe, I wanted to just talk about epigenetic drift. I think it's really important for the people listening. So every single cell in my body has exactly the same genetic code as every other cell in my body. But interestingly, many cells in my body do completely different things. So a skin cell does something vastly different than a brain cell, or a blood cell. So how is that? Why is that if they all contain the same DNA? Well, that is because there is machinery inside the nucleus of every cell, which controls the genes, or which controls which genes are turned on and which genes are turned off. And this machinery is called the epigenome. Okay, and it sits above. It sits above our genome, and that's a metaphor. It doesn't really sit above it. It could be anywhere, but it's all made up of heaps of different pieces of moving parts. And the epigenome controls what genes should be turned on and what genes should be turned off. So this is very, very relevant, because there is a lot of technology now coming out to what we call epigenetic regulators, which we know can cause certain types of epigenetic expression inside the nucleus. So one of the reasons we age is because of a phenomenon known as epigenetic drift. Okay, so the epigenome drifts with age. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you're 20 years old, you may not have any grey hair. And you don't have grey hair because your body is producing an enzyme called catalase, and that breaks down the hydrogen peroxide, which bleaches the hair. Okay, so it's that simple. Now, epigenetic drift starts to come in after the age of 20, and the enzyme that produces catalase gets turned down. And that allows the hydrogen peroxide to take hold in people, and people start to get grey hair from that. That's a prime example of epigenetic drift. But it also happens across every other biological system. So it happens to things like testosterone. Testosterone in men starts to go down. There's a coenzyme inside every cell of the body, which is paramount for longevity, called NAD, and that's something we should maybe talk about later. But even NAD gets turned down. So you want to resist epigenetic drift at all costs, and you want to either slow it, stop it, or completely reverse it. So there are websites you can go to which will show you various epigenetic foods, and this is called the Epigenetic Diet. I have a very, very strong epigenetic diet, and there are foods that can also speed up epigenetic drift as well. One of the things we know speeds up epigenetic drift is insulin spikes. Okay, so when you're eating those high sugary foods and your insulin is spiking up here like this, there's a correlation between people who have years and years of that and accelerated epigenetic drift. So the opposite is true. If you don't have sugar spikes, and if you eat certain types of foods, you can actually not just slow. Science now shows that you can reverse epigenetic drift, where people who have grey hair are starting to get blackness at the roots because its catalase is getting turned back on. And there's a friend of mine in America. His name's Dr. Greg Fay. He was the one that actually first learned how to reverse epigenetic drift. But I can tell you right now, it's very easy to slow down. One is obviously through fasting, because you're not having any insulin spikes when you fast. The second thing is I'll name 4 or 5 compounds that you should be ingesting. Green tea is a great epigenetic regulator. So is another product called curcumin. Curcumin is it's a compound which is extracted from turmeric. Okay, so you can go to a cafe sometimes and they offer turmeric lattes and things like this. I would get a turmeric latte because it contains curcumin. Don't confuse curcumin with cumin. Okay, they're completely different herbs. If they, I don't even think they are called herbs, but they're completely different. So you need curcumin to resist epigenetic drift. There's other things as well. One is called sulforaphane, and it's found in broccoli. It's a very, very powerful epigenetic regulator. So I use that as well. Selenium is another one. Betaine is another one. So if you can supplement with those, you are on the way to slowing down or reversing epigenetic drift. You probably won't reverse it just with these supplements or with this diet, but you'll certainly have a significant effect on the speed at which the epigenome likes to drift through our age. Another one is metformin. Okay, so that's the diabetic drug that we mentioned earlier. It's been known to slow down or have an effect on epigenetic drift. So there's a lot more coming out on the epigenetic diet because it's such a modern diet. People talk about ketosis, like obviously Joe's interested in that, and there's a lot of other diets and fads out there that people look at. But for longevity, the epigenetic diet will probably be one of the most important things that longevitists will start to look at. So keep that in mind because that's important. And
yeah, definitely. I was more into the health side of it rather than the weight loss part of it. I want to get healthy. I want to feel good. And so epigenetic diet is something I've never heard of. I'm definitely going to research this. And
yeah, right.
Obviously you added off 5 different sort of products that are beneficial in that. What sort of diets do you compose together for an epigenetic diet now? Like, you're obviously cooking broccoli, but what sort of is there menus and everything you can look up, recipes that you can look up online for these diets?
There are, I don't know the websites off the top of my head. Google would be able to show you that.
Sure.
I do have a website which contains this information, which I don't mean to plug things on your podcast, Joe, but
no, this is a podcast about you and you've got every right to plug as much as you want. Just get that clear. There's not a problem. Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So there's a domain name that I'm going to give you all. It is scienceofaging.life. So scienceofaging.life. And that website, it contains a mini course. It also, actually, my book's on there, so you can see my book if you need to get it. It will take you straight to the page on Amazon. And you can also interact with me on there as well. There's like a little forum on there. So if you want to come there, talk about biohacking, ask questions.
Science of Aging, did you say?
Yeah, Science of Aging. Now, that's aging without the letter E. So it's just A-G-I-N-G. There's 2 ways to spell aging, the English way and the American way. So we don't use the E. So scienceofaging.life and
.life.
.life, that's right, yeah. So I've got a couple of websites. I don't use the .com extension. I use the .life extension because that's what I'm about. I'm trying to check
the cookies. The cookies run at the bottom there if that's spelled correctly. www.scienceofaging.com with no E. Can you see that on the screen?
.life. Let's have a look. I'm
just
not
at
seeing
the bottom.
anything.
Just at the bottom of the screen where we are, underneath the stage, you've got a fortune cookie. I just try to put it in there. It says www.scienceofaging.life.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, let's have a look.
Yep.
Sorry, mate.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it now. Sorry, my photo was in front of it. Science.
Not a problem. Yep, that's a clickable link now, everyone. So you can click that link and actually go to that website and have a look at it.
So, yeah, I imagine that, I imagine your listeners they listen to me talk and I know if I was listening to someone like me talk and I didn't have this knowledge, I'd have 100 questions. So hopefully, if there's any questions and if they don't put them here, Joe, they can.
We can do that. We can do that here. So we can say, and this is all fairly new to me. If anyone wants to ask a question, the reaction button's at the bottom. Just or hit the microphone button. I'll be able to see that in the little bubble. Okay, and we'll bring someone up to stage to ask a question. And we'll pop them back down. Right now, we've got Elvis the King in the house. So let's welcome Elvis up. He's got a question there for you, Ray.
Elvis,
just unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask. He's a good friend of mine here, Elvis. You got to unmute there. There we go.
Did I figure it out? Did I get it?
Yep, got you.
There we go. All right. Yeah, I got a new iPhone. It's really tiny. It's like the size of a credit card. It's really hard to see with my old Now, you said a few interesting things there about how when you boil vegetables and things, it takes nutrients out, right? Now, there's something down south that people eat called poke salad. And if you eat it raw, it'll kill you because it's so rich in vitamin A. You'll actually
Right.
OD on vitamin A. So you had to boil it like 3 times. So that's just proof that what you said is correct, that if you boil it 3 times for an hour each time, the last time you can eat it, it doesn't have enough vitamin C in it. So it actually boils the nutrients out.
Yeah. Wow. What food group is that?
It's kind of like a weed that they grow. When you're real poor, you just eat what's around. And
Yeah. Right.
I always thought, who's the first guy to eat that? The guy. And then the second guy was like, well, let's boil it first. Then they had to boil it 3 times. That means probably 3 trying to figure out if that was edible or not. They call it poke salad. I don't know what the actual technical name of the plant is, but it just grows everywhere in the hot climates in North America.
Yeah, interesting. I've never heard of that. But, it's actually a great survival mechanism when you think about it. You see all these TV shows where people are living out in the bush, naked and afraid, Bear Grylls. A lot of plants, they can't eat them because they're poisonous. But, if they had a fire, they could just boil them for an extended period of time to remove a lot of the poisons. Yeah, interesting.
But you see, if you look at vitamin supplements, very rarely do you find one with vitamin A in it because people tend to take too much of medicine and too much over-the-counter pills and things that I don't understand the idea of eating pills. I'd rather eat the vegetable,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. With health products as well, I will point out that 99% of people that live in the first world will never, ever be malnourished, ever. So a lot of these health supplements that people are buying, such as vitamin A, vitamin B, and other ones, are a complete waste of money. So if any of you are buying those types of products, get a blood test first and see if you're deficient. Because if you're not, you're probably just throwing money down the drain.
Yeah, I mean, I know people that take multivitamins every day, but they eat so healthy. Like, I've never been a nutritionist, but I've always eaten healthy. I don't like prepackaged food. If it comes in a box that you bought came from a factory, I don't consider that food. That's just something to fill your stomach. I mean, you might as well eat a dish sponge.
It's a great way to think. That's exactly how I am. I'd never eat food from a packet.
Because I like the idea of a lot of Asian cuisines where every ingredient has a purpose. They know what this spice does or this vegetable does, and they mix it in there, not just for flavor like we do here, just put some more bacon on it to make it taste good. You can put bacon on whole food and it'll taste good enough. But I had this idea. There was a couple things. You guys were talking so much, I was supposed to write these down because I forget. My mind goes too fast. Like this idea of raw food. I kind of like that idea. Like for me, for instance, I don't peel carrots. And you said something about cutting out sugar and you eat carrots and they're so sweet. It's almost like candy. Exactly. Yep. I cut sugar out I don't like when you cut it out and you go back to it, you rarely want it because it's just so too damn sweet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It does.
That's what makes it easy. You don't want it anymore. You just go, wow, I can't believe I used to eat that.
I can't eat a candy bar. I get a sore throat from it, actually.
Wow.
It makes me feel sick when I eat it. But like if you eat carrots and celery, you can actually taste that. My favorite raw vegetable is arugula. Now, if you're a meat eater and you want to get off of meat, start eating raw arugula. There's so much. It has to be iron in that. A lot of iron. That's what I imagine because it actually can taste like meat if you eat it. But that's one of my favorite leafy greens to eat. The only thing I think of right now is this idea of raw vegetables. Now, when food starts deteriorating and natural things like decay, it creates heat as a byproduct of that, right?
Yep.
So I always had this idea that once you start cooking it, you're starting to, beginning that decomposition process.
Yeah, you're breaking it down when you cook it,
right?
Yep.
So is that does that scientifically make sense? Because I never looked into it. I have these ideas, and I want to look into all of them, but there's not only 24 hours in a day.
So look, I don't know if I know when you cook foods, you break them down. And if you cook them at high enough temperatures, you break down a lot of the healthy molecules that are inside them. And some of those healthy molecules, if you can imagine what a molecule looks like, it might be a hexagon with some lines coming off and then 2 more hexagons. And when you break that by cooking it at high temperature and you're left with just a hexagon and 2 lines, that could be a toxic, that could be a poison, because if that fits on the surface of a cell and it tricks the cell receptor into thinking it's a nutrient or something like that, but it's not, and then it's led into the cell, it can do all sorts of nasty things in there. So this is one of the reasons why the World Health Organization has classified cooked meat as a class 1 carcinogenic compound, meaning it causes cancer, because there's so many unknowns that we don't know there's an infinite amount of molecules, and we just don't know what every one of them does yet, but we do know that a lot of them interfere with the inside of the cell and can cause mutations in the nucleus. So cooking that food, it just breaks it down. It does speed up the decaying process of it. And that's why I say if you're going to cook it, just cook it on low and slow. And then don't cook it in 5 minutes. Try and put it in the oven for maybe half an hour to 45 at a much lower temperature. You'll maintain all the nutrients. But look, at the end of the day, if you live in the West as well, Elvis, and I mean the Western world, you're not going to be malnourished anyway. So if you did eat some food that was cooked at high temperature and the nutritional value is, being reduced by 70%, someone like yourself, you're still going to be very healthy. So I would say it's great to see that you're into raw foods and you eat arugula and things like this. It's fantastic, because a lot of people I know wouldn't in a million years, just because they're so conditioned to eating the fun stuff. They treat food as entertainment. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, if you can, eat most of the time healthy, like the 80-20 rule, 80% really healthy food, 20% little bit naughty, maybe you cooked it quickly, or maybe there is some meat in there, you should still be okay. You don't have to be too strict.
One of the things that changed the way I ate was I worked in a restaurant, and when you see how things are prepared, especially in a restaurant, if you go to a restaurant, you might as well just consider it fast food no matter where you go, because they're making it for flavor, they're not making it for your health. And a lot of times with the human body, the things that are really bad for us, we like them a whole lot more for some reason. I don't know why, but they're not worried about the calories in the food or anything like that, the salt content of it. They just want to make it taste good so you come back and eat it. But at home, you can control that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, restaurants are not your friend.
No.
Yeah, they're not. Restaurants are probably the biggest cause of heart disease on the planet.
And people eat out in America. They eat out breakfast and lunch, and then go home for dinner. And what do they have for dinner? Let's just order a pizza. Get all those carbs. Just simple carbs before you go to bed. That's a good idea. If you have a problem waking up, you eat a lot of protein and vitamin D. That's what the sunshine does to you all day, right? Gives you vitamin D. You go home. I don't know anybody that worked a hard day outside that went home and had trouble sleeping. It's not.
Yeah,
it's
right. You're right. It does knock you out.
Like you were talking about, you only eat a few times a day or once a day or whatever. I don't look at the clock to determine when my mealtime is. I listen to my body. When I get hungry, I eat something. I mean, what's better than that? Your body tells you everything that's wrong with you. But we're being conditioned. We're being trained that this is you eat breakfast, and you have your 2 15-minute breaks a day and a half-hour lunch in between, right? That's we fit, and we're cogs in the wheel to the works of making money machine that we're all slaves to. But your body will tell you a lot. That's all I know. I listen to that mostly, and people like you who are informed. And you said some things that I'm like, I have no idea. You lost me there. You're saying scientific stuff. I don't know. But thanks for sharing your knowledge with everybody. And nutrition is really, really important. A lot of the problems in America, especially, the biggest problem and the biggest killer is obesity. And they'll say, well, no, it's not, because heart disease and stuff. Yeah, but that's related to obesity. Like all the things that are major killers, the underlying thing is you're overweight. You're eating unhealthy. And that's it. I mean, your body's a machine. You don't put diesel fuel in your gasoline burning car, because it's not how it runs. But that's what we're doing with our bodies every day. That's what we're doing. That's why at the beginning of this podcast, I kind of said that food is not there to comfort you or entertain you. It's there to provide nutrition and energy. That's all food is. But we've confused it as a comfort and as a form of entertainment. And if we can go back to how we should be with food, then most of the diseases you see in the US and around the world, Australia is not much better. A lot of those diseases would be a thing of the past. Well, you said something interesting to me that I was kind of it perked my attention. I said, that doesn't make sense to me. The artificial sweeteners. Now I look for alternative natural sweeteners like stevia extract and things like that, because I know those purple things, they're classified as neurotoxins a lot of times. And I know there's a guy who used to be a preacher, and he went to a nutritionist because everybody in his congregation was overweight and everybody was sick and dying. And he's doing all these prayer requests for people who are sick and ill. And he's looking at them, they're unhealthy and fat. So he became like a nutritionist, and he said, if you take the pink packet or whatever's in that, aspartame or I don't know, phenylglucotronics or whatever the heck is in that, if you mix that with a ham sandwich, a ham sandwich and Diet Coke for lunch every day for your life, you're going to eat holes in your frontal lobe and give yourself brain cancer, because the way it metabolizes turns into another chemical. Like you said, when you cook things, it splits apart. And just because you eat two innocent things doesn't mean they're not going to go together and make something that's, I mean, if you drink something that's considered a neurotoxin, like the Coca-Cola trucks that deliver that, they have to have hazmat placards on the side. And you want to drink that? I don't want to drink it.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. So the two things that I mentioned on that, Botox is a neurotoxin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy. So people inject neurotoxin into their faces, which I think is quite crazy. But yeah, the way neurotoxins work though, it doesn't cause any damage. And so some of those artificial sweeteners, if you were to put them in a petri dish in a lab and you put them in certain environments with certain cells, they can have a toxic effect. And look, and I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form it's healthy. I'm not saying artificial sweeteners are healthy. I'm simply saying.
How do you feel about the stevia leaf extract and other extracts that are coming out with that aren't cane sugar and processed cane sugar,
If it doesn't raise your insulin levels, then I think they're fantastic. And I absolutely think you should use them. Yeah. Well, only use them if you really, really need to use them. Ultimately, what you want to do is wean yourself off. And it sounds like you already have anything that tastes sweet. I don't so like it sounds like you're already there, Elvis. So, and I'm not, so I will clarify. I'm not saying artificial sweeteners are healthy, but I am saying in my quest to resist epigenetic drift and maintain low insulin levels, I would rather have the occasional artificial sweetener over sugar.
So that's like a necessary evil to keep you on the right track until you get
exactly.
Well,
a necessary evil. But
I liked fizzy drinks. I liked soda when I was younger, and the way I got off it, I started drinking seltzer. And I would drink seltzer water, and I would put a splash of cranberry in there, sort of make it like a half-assed lazy Italian soda. You ever have those? It's basically like a sparkling water with fruit juice and stuff. I'd put a squirt of lime in it, and then you start weaning stuff off. And see, people argue with me this, seltzer's no good for you. It's no good for you. I was like, why do you say that? It's got bubbles in it. You burp them out. Plus, they found with people that drink seltzer, they drink more water than people that drink regular water because it's actually tastes good. You want to drink it.
Of course,
But, just do what you can do. There's no textbook thing that we all have to follow. Everybody's body's different. We all have different, chemical makeups of each other. I mean, we're not exactly the same. So what works for you, it keeps you healthy. That's the main thing. If you're healthy and you feel good, that's...
I couldn't agree more with you. Agree more with you. Everybody is different. And, people are going to do their longevity journey or their ketosis or their epigenetic diet. And people are going to eat different things. They're going to wake up at different times. They're going to exercise at different times. Some people just can't bring themselves to exercise in the morning. Some people, I've got a friend who wakes up he's ex-military. He's up at 4 or 5 every morning and he runs for about 10 Ks. And then he gets home, he trains and lifts weights. And then he has a shower. And then at 7 a.m. he's, on the phone doing business. And then at 8:30 he's at work. And I'm like, man, how do you do that? So, we
does all that before he goes to the gym, by the way.
I can't do that. I can't do that. If it 9:30 at night, that's my time when I get energetic. I've always been a night owl. My mom said even when I was a little baby, I'd wake up at night. If she didn't put me to bed at a certain time, I was up to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, even as an infant. So, but my neighbor wakes up at 4:30 every morning, and I'm like, why does she do that? She doesn't leave the house till 6. What is she doing all that time? Jeez. But everybody's different. Just listen to your body and don't listen to people that are pushing drugs on you because the pharmaceutical business, that's how they make money, keeping you sick, right?
Well, look, I do want to say, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm in the business of keeping people healthy. So if 1,000 people implement a regime and change their diets based on information I give them and they don't get disease, I'm never actually going to know whether I had any impact on their life or not. There's no proof I did. But with a doctor, if you go to a doctor and you say, my kidney's hurting and they see that you've got maybe a cancerous spot on it and they cut it out, well, that doctor can say, well, look, I helped you. I got that cancer off your kidney.
Why'd you get it,
but I work in an industry, right, where I'm trying to keep people young and healthy. I'm into prevention. I don't want people to get sick in the first place. Whereas pharmaceutical companies, a lot of them need you to get sick in the first place for them to make money. So this is why, like the pharmaceutical company, we saw a TV show once. It was called What the Health, and I think it was on Netflix. But it was quite fascinating. They kind of were showing that pharmaceuticals are in bed with the farming and the meat industry, and it might be one of the reasons why that a lot of these foods, there's no huge movement around the world to ban them or to educate people about the dangers of them, because there's so much money involved and these industries are so big that they can't afford to go backwards. And of course, big pharma make billions and billions and billions by treating diseases, but they don't make any money if people aren't getting any diseases. So you know what I mean? So
in your country, they don't advertise on television like pharmaceutical, like narcotic grade pharmaceuticals. They don't advertise it on TV where you are, do they?
No, not really, no.
Every other commercial in the United States is for some pill or some supplemented pill that goes with another pill that they just advertise with. Now you watch a football game, it's fast food, beer, pharmaceuticals. That's only people to advertise.
Wow.
So they're convincing people with, marketing that's witchcraft through the television, as far as I'm concerned. They're training your brain to think you need this stuff. Now, I haven't had a television in my house that was connected to outside TV service in 25 years plus. And guess what? I don't think I need anything, and I don't think I have every illness in the world. Don't go on WebMD. You got a hangnail. No, you're going to die any minute. Just rush to the emergency room right now if you got a hangnail, because they have to put all that stuff. The other thing is lawyers and stuff. They have to put all these disclaimers out there and cover everything, because that you could sue them if they gave you wrong advice, right? Yep. So I don't give medical advice. I just give advice that worked for me in my life, and I tell you to listen to your body, and I tell you to do what you need to do to be the best you that you can be. But like you said, you're creating long-term customers. The pharmaceutical companies just want people sick, come back every month to get your prescription and whatnot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, if everyone was healthy.
The oil industry, a lot of petroleum in the pills over here, the casings and all the things, they're all in cahoots together. They're all here to make money off of you. But the craziest thing is, in this country, the toy stores, the big toy store chain, they supported Planned Parenthood and gave money. I was like, what? You're getting rid of your customer base. What are you doing? You know what I mean? It's that kind of mentality, but they don't care about you. They care about your money. And
are your earbuds running out there, Ray? Are they?
I can still hear okay. My earbuds
I'll get
ran
out
out
of
of battery, but I can hear fine.
Yeah, Elvis, we're gonna have to pop you down, man, for a bit.
Just want to say thank you guys for the information, and I enjoyed every minute of it, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you later.
Thanks, Elvis. Nice being
Thank you, brother. Cheers, man. Cheers. Okay, so we just wondered if anyone else has any wind-up questions as we start to wind up the podcast. Yeah, they ran out, so we'll do that. But look, we're going to be doing some more shows together, Ray and myself, over the coming year. So I'm looking forward to that. But if anyone does have any questions before we start to wrap it up, now is the time. We lost the signal on stereo, and I don't know if I got to hit the live stream properly over on YouTube or not, but I'm going to test it out. Again, I'm very new at this multi-streaming, simulcasting, sorry. So I hope it did work. But yeah, cool, mate, not a problem. All right. As we're starting to wrap this up, we've got Dave there. I am Dave in the audience. So thank you, him and Sam. I think I saw Sam pop into the room before as well. Another couple of great people that do a great show over on stereo. Hopefully they get themselves over to Fireside as well. They may want to interview you too, because they do interviews with people as well.
Sure.
So any last sort of thoughts or that you want to leave the listeners with at the moment, Ray, for today's show? And bearing in mind that we're going to definitely be back, and I'm going to catch up with you over this Christmas break too. So any last words you want to say?
Final thoughts is have a safe and great Christmas and or festive season, and a safe New Year. I'm not your doctor, so I don't know if you've got any underlying medical conditions. So anything that you've heard me say, go and talk to your doctor first. However, if he's not a scientist, he may not be up to date with a lot of the science I've talked about here today. So don't blindly just rush out and start maybe changing things. If you already have an underlying medical condition, just be careful. But everything we've talked about should be pretty safe, except gene editing. Don't go out and start editing your own genes unless you know.
Absolutely. Big round of applause there for Ray as well from the audience, please. Thanks for joining in today's podcast. I really do appreciate it, man. Taking the time with me, and looking forward to a lot more. So cheers, Ray. Thanks. Where can people find you on social media?
So I've got a Twitter account, which is Ray. I think it's Ray D Palmer, all one word. So yeah, Ray D for dangerous, Palmer. I'm not dangerous, and
he's deadly.
Follow me on Twitter, and
only just really starting to use Twitter. I've had it for years, but I've only just started putting stuff on it up. So what I'm going to do with my Twitter account is put all the latest and greatest discoveries that are happening in the world of anti-aging and some little tips here and there, new things that come up. So keep an eye on my Twitter account because I'll definitely keep that abreast. And that's probably the best place in social media. I will have a YouTube channel going soon for the scienceofaging.life website, and you'll see me add some of my new lessons up there and things like that. So, but you'll be able to see that from my Twitter account very shortly.
Perfect, man. Thank you very much. So when you do put those posts up on Twitter, tag me in it. I'll retweet them as well. I'm more than happy to do that. I did see Brianna still there. Brianna, do you want to pop up and say hello? Brianna is someone who's into biohacking. She's someone who's very healthy. I do see her in the audience there. She was listening up for this show. I did let her know that I was going to be speaking to you. So I think this particular field is exactly what she is into. But I know she might be shy right now. She might not be able to talk either because it's probably getting late over in the US. But nonetheless, okay. So for those that are listening that aren't already, please follow or subscribe to the Rocstedi Podcast over on YouTube. You'll find me under there as Rocstedi. I'm trying to build the following up on that particular platform. Of course, we're hosted here today on Fireside. It is my honor to be here on Fireside with you today, Raymond. And you can also find me on other social media platforms as in Instagram _Rocstedi and Twitter _Rocstedi, as well as TikTok now starting to go too. So thanks again, Ray, for your time today, mate. Really appreciate it. I will contact you after this show to chat on the phone. So we'll speak again soon.
Fantastic, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, mate. All the best. Bye-bye.
No worries.
I'll turn the weight bot on.